welcome to the Neurotrain Collaborative podcast. I'm Erin.
I'm Katie.
I'm Kelly.
And today we're going to talk to you about the importance of getting outside. There are so many benefits when we go outside that are underrated and I don't think are talked about enough. And so today that's the topic that we're going to dive into. One of the aspects that I really love about going outside, whether you're doing your exercise, you're going for a walk, you're doing sprints, is the aspect of actually using your distance vision. When we're indoors, we don't hardly look past maybe 10 or 20 feet. But when you're outside, your eyes actually can fully diverge when you look off into the distance, whether you're looking down the block or looking across the park. If you're looking at birds or different animals, our eyes actually get the opportunity to go into full divergence, which helps actually kick in that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest aspect. And that can be really, really powerful for just resetting the nervous system and lowering stress by itself. One of the other things I really love about being outside is that you get more access to your peripheral vision. So again, when we're talking about creating more health in our neural networks, peripheral vision is key for how we walk around, how we carry our head, what our posture looks like. And when we're outside, because we're not just boxed into a house, we're actually seeing things go by in our peripheral vision. We're seeing animals, we're seeing movement, we're seeing cars, houses, things like that. And those are all really, really easy, healthy ways to start to bring better health into that neural network and kind of enforce our use of our peripheral vision.
I like that a lot, Erin. And it's so interesting. I remember as a kid growing up and being told by my grandmother or my parents, like, oh, you must have gotten a lot of fresh air today. You seem very relaxed. Or you seem tired. Did you get a lot of fresh air? And it was always framed in a way that like getting fresh air, being outside will make you more relaxed and sleepy. And it is this idea that we're able to actually open up our field of vision and just give more feedback to our systems, which has a really nice calming effect. You might sleep a little better that night, wake a little bit more well-rested the next day. And that's what we really want to see.
Well, and a huge thing
that.
Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
That fresh air aspect for me is a big olfactory sense activation because there are a lot of places where you can go and pick up on the subtle changes in smell. And I just happened to be in a different environment over the weekend where there were just different kinds of trees and the air smelled totally different from where I usually am. And that brightened my whole sense of the out of doorsness where I was and made me feel a lot more relaxed, being able to smell something that was sweet and it was a good smell. I wasn't standing by the highway smelling exhaust. I was smelling the natural world, and that made me feel really good.
Totally. Awesome. That is such a good point. We have these special trees in the park by our house, and I think they're lindenberry trees, but they smell so good in the summertime. And I love the smell of fresh cut grass, but I also love the smell of fall because it has a very unique smell to it. And even in the wintertime, that like ozone of the snow and the cold air, and that has its own wet pavement that has its own unique smell as well, which is like has a different nostalgia that brings up some really good memories for me too.
Rain, like being able to smell rain coming too is one of my favorite things, especially in the middle of a drought that we've been in. It's good to smell rain, and that rain on the hot pavement too. That's a real sense memory for me.
And even the auditory aspect. I mean, this year, because we've got a significant more amount of rain than usual in Colorado, we have a lot of different birds in the area. And like you hear your typical robin, like this is normal for Colorado, robin, raven, doves, that kind of stuff. But then there's some like other really interesting sounds. I've been seeing blue herons on the river by our house. And so it's just even like the alertness of those sounds, the buzzing of bees, the, cars passing by, people riding their bikes next to you, and your ability to locate sound is kicked in when you're going outside and walking or exercising or even just reading a book. You're still getting that extra auditory stimulus and your brain's processing where these things are around you and how close and that kind of thing.
I love also the sense that I get from my skin when the sunlight hits it at different times of day, at different times of year. There, if you step out and take a moment not to pay attention to anything else, but just how it feels to be in the sunlight, there's something that shifts when you step from the indoors to the outdoors and that skin light connection that always feels really calming. And then, you know, we would, there's the temperature variations that we're going to undergo, sensing different temperatures during different times of year, but having natural sunlight on your skin is definitely something that calms, activates that resting sense and that being outdoors. And then I also feel like the natural light that comes into my eyes makes me feel like I want to gaze with a different sense of using my visual system, finding those broader, you know, look at the mountains that are miles away, or the way the trees are, and having that sense of grandeur changes everything about going outside.
Totally. Even the clouds changing in the sky and the weather coming in, and like you're just looking, and that's a novelty aspect of being outside because it's never the same, you know. And the colors of the leaves and the flowers or whatever, and the contrasts. Those are all another piece that you'd be missing if you were staying indoors for the majority of your day. Katie, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I love being barefoot outside. That's one of my favorite things. If it's a safe area that I can be barefoot in, oh my gosh, it's one of the best things in the world. And even if I have shoes on, I find it much more tiring in a good way and relaxing to walk on different surfaces. So walking on the grass, walking on pavement, walking on sidewalks, walking on uneven ground, and having to navigate, okay, how do my feet shift? How do my ankles shift? How does everything north of foot shift just because my ground is shifting a little bit? I would much rather go on a 2-mile hike through the woods than I would 3 or 4 miles on pavement. And I feel more satiated if I'm walking on uneven ground. It's not for everyone, right? I've worked really hard on my balance and my ankle strength and everything else to earn that right to walk through the woods, and even barefoot sometimes. So we do want you to be safe when you're doing this. Certainly if you're having balance issues, go with a friend, hold someone's hand, do safe things that make you feel safe in that moment when you're walking. We don't want this to be a tripping hazard. And then as you build up that strength, that stability, do a little bit more walking on unsteady, not unsteady ground, but uneven ground.
And being outside has a huge effect on appetite. A lot of people don't realize this, but during the winter times, we tend to crave the more fatty foods and like the comfort foods, and it's cold and we want to be warm and we're not going outside as much. So it's very natural for us to eat a little bit extra calories during the winter time. I find in the summertime, I have way less appetite. I'm not craving the fatty things. I'm looking for more sugary things and leaner protein options. They're more satisfying. I want things that are going to cool me down because it's hot outside. And a piece of that, you know, there's been studies that show that when you step outside, I think your cortisol, if you're outside for 20 minutes, your cortisol drops by like 40% or something like that. A part of that is that when light comes into our eyes, it actually converts some of those catecholamines over to dopamine. So going from adrenaline to dopamine. And I know for me in the wintertime, sometimes my sleep gets kind of not great, or might have a harder time falling asleep, or my mind is just going and going and going. And part of that is that excessive adrenaline, excessive serotonin aspect of being in the dark. And so getting that light in the eyes can be key for just getting that dopamine, which is usually what we're seeking out. One of the things that we're seeking out when we're craving fattier foods, we're looking for that dopamine hit, along with, of course, things that will carry our fat soluble vitamins, but and then feeling satiated. But for me, that sunshine and being outside and having those novel walks really curbs a lot of that aspect for me.
Definitely.
That increase in the sunlight and vitamin D use usually makes me want the more sugary foods. I definitely feel like the need for fuel. Probably why lemonade and watermelon taste so good in the summertime, because it's easy fuel to access. And interestingly enough, like when people experience seasonal affective disorder in the wintertime, or they're feeling depressed because there's not a lot of sunlight, People can also feel depressed at the end of the summer because there's so much sunlight. If they're really metabolically challenged, they can be maybe at a deficit in their vitamin A retinol, and not having the right balance of those nutrients can also lead to different sensations by the time, especially in California, in August and September, we're still really hot and more dry than at the beginning of the summer. And there are people who feel that that is very challenging metabolically. So I encourage people to make sure they've got their retinol, that they're still getting a balance of their vitamin D and vitamin A and everything, all the other good things, and then making sure they're eating easy fruits, things that are going to nourish that fast fuel side of brain activity.
And light also increases sugar usability. So when you go in the light, you're using more sugars too. And so there's that aspect of needing more sugars because you're using more sugars when you go outside. And the hotter you are, the more sugars you burn. So there's kind of that double whammy aspect. It's interesting because a lot of people in the summertime kind of encourage more water drinking, and that might be appropriate depending on your climate. But I find that I crave more watery foods, kind of like the watermelons, the melons, the fruits, the juices, the cucumbers, things that are going to really bring in the water aspect, but mixed in with actual electrolytes like potassium and sodium and calcium and magnesium. I almost rarely drink just straight up water, unless I'm feeling hot. Like the last week, I've had a little bit more water than I normally drink, but I get a lot of more fluids in that have that, like, the orange juice and, like I said, the watermelon, those kinds of things that have that more watery aspect, but also have the electrolytes already in them, the minerals that we need to keep the water in our body.
That's
Any
a
other
great point.
insights, you guys, that you want to add to this?
I would say that if you're struggling, sometimes in the summer, we can struggle with feeling like we're overheated, feeling uncomfortable, not liking to sweat too much. And the same can go for the winter too, right? We can get way too cold and have trouble regulating our body temperature. What I have noticed, the longer I eat a more pro-metabolically friendly diet, the easier it is to regulate my temperature. So being out in 85-degree weather in the sun is not as affecting to me as it used to be 5-6 years ago, right? It used to really get to me. Hot days were really hard. Humidity, it was difficult for me. And I just don't see that happening as much anymore. And if I do, then I know, hey, I need to get some more fruit in. I need some protein. I need something else to feel better in this weather. But it typically is a very quick fix. Once you've been doing this a while, I do tend to see people feel a lot better with those highs and lows of where the temperature might be in your area. It's just so much easier to adjust. So if it is something that you're currently struggling with, stick with it. It does get better. And you can almost use that as a gauge to know, hey, how am I doing? How am I doing with my pro-metabolically friendly diet? Is it working for me? Do I need to adjust something so that I am more comfortable outside or even indoors? I find myself using a lot less air conditioning every year because I'm just comfortable where I am. And with the use of fans and windows, it's not terrible. It's really actually quite comfortable, where I think if it had been, let's see, 73 in my house maybe a couple years ago, that would have been too warm for me in the summer. So I feel like it's a lot easier. It'll get up to 75, 76 in the house, and I'm still really comfortable now.
These are all really good points. I think the last thing I'll say is sun on the skin, light on the skin, helps release more of our natural hormones like pregnenolone and progesterone and DHEA, and those are our youthful hormones that support thyroid function and reduce stress on the body. So avoiding the sun isn't always the best choice. I know that skin cancer is always a scare for people. A lot of I would just say skin cancer period is directly connected to high polyunsaturated fatty acids in the diet. So when you start eating more saturated fats, you burn less. Getting more things like niacinamide or B3 in your diet can help dramatically with avoiding skin damage. Using coconut oil on the skin can protect your skin from skin damage. I made a homemade lotion recently with coconut oil, vitamin E, and progesterone. And I whipped it up in my KitchenAid for like 5 or 6 minutes, and I have it in a little body butter container. And I use that as my post sun moisturizer. So after I'm in the sun, I use it on my skin. That can help um, minimize skin damage for sure, and then also reverse some of the skin damage that might already be there, sunspots or moles, things like that. It's amazing what progesterone can do for some of those things that can be side effects of getting a lot of sun or getting some skin damage there.
Definitely. And I'll say the last note for me is that there are days where I'm going to go out and have a little bit of alcohol on a boat, or maybe eat some foods that are not as pro-metabolically friendly to me, but just sometimes need to be a human. Those are the days where I'm going to cover up a little bit more, because it does put you at an added risk anytime there's alcohol or unsaturated fats added in your diet that day. It'll put you at a little bit more of a risk to burn or have some skin damage or just have irritation. So those are the days where I am going to cover up a little bit more, maybe sit in the shade, just be a little bit more thoughtful of my sun exposure. But as soon as that PUFA is out of my system, I've taken my vitamin E, I've done the things, it's been a couple of days, then I don't tend to cover up as more anymore, and I let that sun just hit my skin.
And if you're doing a lot of weight loss during the summer, burning body fat is going to release a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids into your diet, even if you're not eating them. So just a reminder there, it's just always good to protect with your vitamin E, your coconut oil, saturated fats,
Aspirin is helpful as well.
niacinamide. Yep, those things can be really, really protective. And one more piece is calcium. We cannot emphasize the importance of calcium and usable calcium. Unfortunately, plants don't have a calcium source that we use very well, and they have a lot of anti-nutrients like oxalates and different things that block our ability to use certain minerals. So I have switched all my green salads over to watermelon salad, cucumber salad, carrot salad, things like that that are easier to digest. They have usable minerals in them, and calcium. If I'm usually getting a fair amount of dairy in my diet, but if I'm not, I'm using either a calcium carbonate supplement or eggshell calcium, which is calcium carbonate.
Awesome.
Anything else, guys?
Awesome. Enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, get out there and enjoy the sun.
It's out there before school starts, and we'll see you in our next episode.